planning classes, which are required, to where, yes, you may think that 50 cents is not that much on a $25 check. But let's say that you are tardy 10 times in a row. Well, you just lost $5. If we start in February and we have 20 days that we work on this, February, March, April, that's 60 days. If you're tardy all 60 days, you have no money. And if this was a real job, you'd probably be fired on the second day, if not the first. So I teach that structure, and at the end of the day, those that do well but don't get that much, they actually get a life lesson on, yes, I know how I acted, yes, I shouldn't have done this, I saw how well I performed, and I wish I didn't make this little $3 check that you gave me. But I had one lady that actually came this last year, and she appreciated everything that I did, even though she made $3. Now, I told her, I said, I appreciate your apology, and I do accept it wholeheartedly. However, your apology doesn't add $22 to the check. But what I did notice, and some of the stories that you won't see, are that I've actually had students that were 19, 20. I even had a 21-year-old student in my class. And the principal was ready to give him his last rites, per se. But he swallowed a whole lot of pride being in that classroom with freshmen, to where he came in, got the lesson. He didn't understand it, but he wanted to be there because he was like, I'm not going to get the certificate of attendance. I'm not going to get the special ed diploma. I want that regular ed diploma, Mr. Ford, so help me. Because he was making only like 30% of the score that you had to make. When he came to my classroom, he almost tripled his score. He went from a 13 to a 41. And you only need the 30 to pass.
So how do you move that level of engagement in your classroom to a more communal engagement around educational issues and ultimately to City Hall and lasting policy changes?
Okay, let me answer the first part. You have to make sure that you're very versed with your neighborhood associations, because a lot of them can do the little bitty things that we might not necessarily be able to do at City Hall. I am very active with several of my neighborhood associations here. As a matter of fact, one of the neighborhood associations, I was able to help get grants for children to not just clean up their community, but to also help those who may also need help, whether it's academic or otherwise. One good example, the 35th Ward 2.5 years ago wanted to get a grant from Memphis City Beautiful. And one thing that I noticed is that group was very timid in asking for money. They were like, well, all we need is maybe like $5,000. I asked them, what's your budget? They're like about $12,000, $13,000. I said, why don't you just go ahead and ask for the max instead of asking for the minimum? And we had an outline where we were going to assist 13 through 17-year-olds, pay them $15 an hour to not just clean the neighborhood, but to also be involved in the neighborhood, whether, like I said, academic or otherwise. The grant was put in. They got $20,000. So they were asked for $5,000. Their budget was $12,000 to $13,000. I asked them to go for the $25,000. They got $20,000. I do that in several neighborhoods to where, as long as we have, like I said before, this is the neighborhood and this is the city. It's up to us to make sure that those neighborhood associations as well as the CDCs are involved. One thing that I've noticed, to go back to the council side, we need to find more fiscal incentives for our CDCs. We do. They work so hard in the neighborhood, not just structural wise, but as far as giving opportunities to those who may not be able to find the opportunities in so many avenues. So one thing as a council member, we can definitely look at ways that we can incentivize those neighborhood associations.
A lot of what you've spoken about, and first of all, it sounds like you're a great teacher and have some great ideas about education, but
what am I missing?
Everything.
What am I missing? What am I missing?
Everything I've heard so far, it sounds like, short term. Okay. I mean, just honestly, it sounds like, you're a member of the city council.
Yes.
Frankly, I've been here for 4 years.
Okay.
Okay? And what I see in Memphis, I think, is a lack of vision.
Okay.
We need to have some long-term goals in terms of education. I've only been to one other interview where I've spoken with a council member, and he said, you know, the three most important issues are crime, jobs, and education. And I could probably agree with that, you know, having thought about it carefully. But what he didn't seem to understand was that the crime and the jobs, there's a strong correlation.
Yes.
So I want to, and what I also heard him say that I found a little disturbing is like, well, you know, in 2 years, we're going to be able to wash our hands of Memphis City schools. That to me was, I mean, he didn't say that word for word, but it's what it kind of sounded like, you know, and I found that very disturbing. And I want to see some leaders on our city council and our county commission and whatever school board we have starting in academic year 2013, 2014, that are willing to build dialogue together and say, what are we going to do so that 15 or 20 years from now we have a top quality educated workforce in Memphis that is a product of our public schools. So could you tell me in, you know, a few minutes how you're willing to do that? Because right now we all know it's not getting done. Memphis on their scores is the second to the bottom in the state of Tennessee, and Tennessee is one of the worst states in the union. And the U.S. is trailing behind every other wealthy nation in the world on education. I mean, not to sound too blunt about it, but you know, I want to build dialogue, and I want to say, I was a teacher in the Czech Republic, and one of my students was an adult student in his 60s who sat on a UN committee. He represented Europe in New York as a finance minister in the Czech Republic. I'm concerned about this city's lack of vision and how we're going to get our education system where it needs to be. So could you tell me as a city council member how you can do that? If that's not too much at once.
No, it's not too much at once. I'm thinking of some things that I wish could be modified as far as policy, but I know that as a council member I would not be able to do. But as far as long-term vision,
yes, sir.
I would love to see, whenever this school board gets compiled, those 7 members, I would love for them to go back and look at what you can incorporate as far as making our students ready when they get that high school diploma. Some things that I've seen currently that have not gotten them ready have been some of the parameters that have been put on our children, such as, and I can say this as a teacher, the lowest score that a student can make is a 58. Where you might have one person argue saying that, well, if you put them too low, they have no opportunity. I was like, yeah, but at the same time, you have some that might, for lack of a better phrase, but I'm gonna be candid, like you.
Well, yeah, and I want to be a little candid, Councilman Ford. I mean, we're going back to the classroom. I'm talking about what the city council can do.
Right. Oh, well,
I mean, because I understand that. I mean, you know, and I'm aware of that argument. I've heard it all before. You know, don't give your students less than a 60 or whatever, and you know, I understand the rationale behind it. But I want to know what the city council can do. And I tell you what some teachers told me, some veteran teachers who've worked a lot longer than I have. They only told me about an hour ago. They said that they thought the dialogue between, and this is not just against the city council, but it's also with the school board. They saw this whole fiasco.
Oh, it was a mess.
They said everybody was acting like a lot of children. And these were, you know, veteran school teachers who've been in the classroom 30 years. And they said it was embarrassing to the city, and it was setting the wrong. He said it told our children who saw it that the adults in the city really don't have a commitment to education. So, I mean, you know, I want to know what what can the city council do? First of all, there needs to be a strong dialogue between the city and the county commission.
Yes, starting now.
Yes, absolutely.
Not July 2013.
And all of what just happened too. I mean, you know, there should have been adults talking to each other several months ago.
I think you just answered the question. We don't